Hey everyone, today I want to give you my top tips and hacks on how to save money buying watercolor supplies. Let's get to it. Hi everyone, my name is Irit. I'm a watercolor and mixed media artist based in Austria in Europe, and on my channel I share everything related to watercolor and mixed media. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Or if you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And of course, I would love for you to subscribe and join the community. I post new videos every week, although I do have to kind of walk that back because in July and August, I probably won't be posting weekly because my kids are on vacation, and hopefully we'll be traveling a bit, but come September it'll be back to routine. I will put timestamps below so you can jump ahead in the video to whatever interests you, and also I will have a stamp update at the end of the video. So the reason I wanted to do this video is because one of the things that are important to me, besides sharing the watercolor joy and just pleasure and therapeutical effects of painting with watercolors, one of the things that I really want to help others do is spend less. And this is not about, if you have the budget and the will to have more things, buy more supplies, that is totally okay. I have a lot, as you can see, but I do feel like sometimes, especially with, social media, it's very easy to, watch hauls and then want all the things. I've been there, I completely understand, but I feel like I want to give a little bit of a little bit of a counter push to those videos, because while watching other YouTubers, review and try products is incredibly helpful, and I do that myself when I want to buy something. I check, what people say about it. I also find that it has negative effects, and also just like the pure use of time. If you're interested in watercolors, I feel it's a better use of your time to paint than watch something like haul videos. And again, I am not shading anyone that does those. They're very enjoyable, but I feel like sometimes it just gets you in that mode of FOMO and wanting to try everything, when in fact you may also notice that the more experience artists have, and I feel like it kind of goes exponentially. You get your first set, you get excited, you start painting, and then you want to try everything because there are so many beautiful supplies out there. So you look around and you see haul videos and you see what people are getting and how it looks, and so if your budget allows for it, you try and you try and you buy and you buy. That's what I did. So I don't want you to think that I managed to skip that part. I didn't. But then the more you paint, the more you realize that when it comes to artist grade supplies, overall, I'm not talking about a particular formulation of a particular pigment, because those can vary sometimes in quality, but overall almost all artist grade paints are very high quality. My hope for you is that after watching this video, you will have, first of all, some practical tips that will help you make more budget-friendly decisions that I feel will not impair in any way your watercolor painting experience. And especially if you're new to this medium, I hope this will kind of help you see that you can try many things and grow your collection, but there are better ways of doing that. And that is my goal for this video. I also want to say that I will link below to some other videos that I feel are very, very helpful when it comes to kind of making more conscious and, in my opinion, wiser decisions when it comes to shopping or purchasing watercolor supplies. Let's start talking specifically. When you're painting with watercolors, there are three main supplies that you're using. You have the paint, you have the brushes, and you have the paper. So let's start with watercolor paint. I'm going to say that this is probably, you know, the biggest temptation because we all love watercolors. I mean, there are so many brands and colors that it's really, really overwhelming. And as someone who loves color, you want to try everything, you want to see everything. But if you want to save money and if you want to save yourself from just having tons of supplies that you will never manage to use up, here are some tips to help you. So the first thing I would say is buy local. In general, most artist grade watercolor ranges are very, very high quality. And a great way to save money is to buy something that is local to you. Now, my specific recommendations are more relevant to the Northern Hemisphere because that's what I'm familiar with, being in Europe. So I do apologize if I don't have, you know, specific practical recommendations for the Southern Hemisphere. I'm just not familiar with what is on offer there. So I do apologize, but I can only speak to what I know. I try to buy as much as I can European brands because I'm in Europe. And besides the fact that I support my local economy or the European Union economy, I save up on shipping charges and customs and all those additional costs that, you know, the customer pays for when you're buying something that is manufactured in a different country, in a different continent. Now, these things can sometimes balance out because, for example, if you buy some brands from the Far East, the labor there is cheaper, and so sometimes you can buy very, very high quality paint for roughly the same price that it will cost you to buy something in Europe because here wages are higher. So those things can balance out, but I would encourage you to think about that when you are buying, especially when you're starting out. Let's say you are in the US. If you're just starting out and you're buying your first set of watercolors, unless you can find like a really, really great deal, I would encourage you to buy a US based brand such as Daniel Smith or Da Vinci, which I haven't tried for myself, but I've heard very, very good things about them. And so I would take that under consideration. The second tip or hack that I have is to search for the home brand or like private labels of major art stores. So for example, in Europe, some of the shops that I've bought from in the past have their own watercolor paint. For example, no longer in Europe since Brexit, but Jackson's Art Supplies and Ken Bromley are UK-based online shops. They have their own watercolors, which is rumored to be made by a known brand because these shops don't have their own, you know, factory for making watercolors. The rumor when it comes to Jackson's is that their paint is actually made by Sennelier. Now, I don't know exactly which range because Sennelier also has their petite paints, I think they're called, and those are considered student grade. But many times you can get a great deal on those paints, and especially if you're starting out, that is a great economical option. Tip number 3. Learn your pigments. Now, this is a little bit of a rabbit hole if you want to go down that road because it is a lot of information. It is quite overwhelming if you're starting out. It might be very confusing, but the thing is that there are pigments that are cheaper and there are pigments that are more expensive just by the way that they are made or harvested or sourced. And first of all, you want to look at the pigment information on your tube paints and make sure you know what you have before you buy the same pigment again. The reason this can be confusing is that sometimes you will have the same pigment under different names in different manufacturer ranges. So for example, Winsor and Newton call some of their paints, Winsor green or Winsor blue, when it's actually a very, very common pigment. If I'm not mistaken, it's the phthalos with their blues and greens that every other brand has. So if you're just starting out, you might think, oh, that's a special color that, Winsor formulated. I should try that, when in fact, it's a very, very common pigment used in basic paint, and every manufacturer uses it, and you'll just be wasting your money. I think this is a good place to mention that I feel there are kind of superstars in every brand's range, and those are worth hunting and acquiring and playing with, but you might have to kind of dig deeper, go to certain resources like Beware, it's a dangerous place, Jane Blundell's site, where she has swatches of pretty much every watercolor ever made on the surface of the earth. And there you can kind of see the differences, because different manufacturers will have their own formulation for every pigment. And so sometimes you'll see that one pigment looks entirely different when formulated by different manufacturers. But this, I would say, is a little bit for the more advanced. I just wanted to mention that because I saw YouTube recommended a haul video by a wonderful channel that I thoroughly enjoyed. I mean, it's not my style of watercolors, but even the hauls are like very, very enjoyable. And the painter there was swatching a set of beautiful paint, a palette with different shades of blue. And it looked amazing. It looks great in the thumbnail. And, I am not judging anyone for buying anything, but as I was watching this video, my first reaction was, oh, I want that. But then when I looked at it, and I think it was a palette with like 12 pans, as I looked at it, most of the pigments I already had. Some were just mixtures of very, very affordable common pigments. My point is, it wasn't really special at all. And then there were a couple of paints that I did find interesting, some pigments that I didn't necessarily have in my collection that I thought, okay, maybe I should look into those. But my point is sometimes, we start watching some amazing haul, we get so excited, we want these items because we think it will bring us something unique in our painting experience, or it's just something lovely to look at, which I also understand, when in fact, if you have a watercolor collection, it can be a very basic watercolor collection, it's very, very likely that you have some, maybe even most of these colors, of these pigments in your collection. Tip number 4. This one I feel very strongly about because I feel this is kind of a trap I fell into way too many times. And that is, if you have already a good basic set of watercolors that you are happy with the formulation and the performance, don't buy any more basic watercolor sets if you want to try a different brand. I think it's very tempting. It's kind of an easy buy because, someone did the work for you and you don't have to be overwhelmed by a range of, 100 or even 200 watercolors, which is what most major manufacturers offer. But I believe you'll be doing yourself a disservice if this is how you choose to grow your collection, because these basic sets tend to kind of cover all their bases on one hand, and so include a very versatile color palette, which might not necessarily correlate with your color preferences. It certainly doesn't correlate with mine. And so you're very likely to not use many of the paints that you're buying. But secondly, and even more importantly, is that these sets, every manufacturer makes them. It's a great introduction for the manufacturer, and it's a great way for beginners to start painting. But mostly they contain the cheaper pigments. And so if you want to try new things, if you want to try different colors, different formulations, you might want to invest in less paint, but pigments that are different, that are more expensive, that maybe perform in a different way, maybe fit your style more. So for example, the cobalts, they tend to be more expensive, and many times they are not included in basic sets because they are more expensive. Thankfully, many manufacturers currently offer all kinds of like specialized sets, either ones that are based on the pigment. So for example, Mgram has a cobalt set, or they will have sets curated by artists, and that will give you just a different kind of experience than a basic set, which will usually have, you know, a couple of yellows, a couple of reds and pinks, a couple of blues, some greens, and some earth tones. And you'll just find, if you continue to buy these basic sets because you want to try other brands, and I completely understand that, you'll find yourself maybe even like stuck in a rut of just like experiencing the same colors again and again. And at that level of artist grade paint, it's a very, very similar experience. You might get lucky and, you know, find that perfect burnt sienna for you that is more intense or granulates more, or whatever it is that you are looking for a paint. But chances are, unless you paint a lot and use all of the colors that tend to come in basic sets, you won't enjoy those palettes as much as you could with other colors. And this brings me to my next tip, which is to mix brands. Don't be afraid to have a palette with more than one brand. There's absolutely no reason to stick to one brand or paint with just one brand on a painting. This is again something you might see a lot of people here on YouTube do. Sometimes it's because we just have a lot of paints, and so it's nice to just, you know, grab a palette and use that. But for most of us that are not YouTubers, it's really unnecessary. There is no logical reason to do that. Sometimes the formulation of the paint can be a little bit different, and so, for example, you know, one company might have a drier paint and the other one more juicy or honey-based paint. And so if you're painting with both of those, you might have to kind of fine-tune your water to pigment ratio, because maybe some paints are going to be very, very intense and very juicy, and others will need some more TLC. But the more you paint, the more you will master also those skills. So don't be afraid to combine different pigments. You know, if you have a lovely palette from, let's say, Daniel Smith, that you love using, like a basic 24 palette, and you want to explore a new brand, you know, pick up, for example, a nice cobalt violet from Rembrandt or Winsor & Newton, and just add that pan to your palette. Don't feel like you should have, you know, a Winsor & Newton set that you can paint on different occasions. So I encourage you to mix paints. I actually found, my experience has shown me that every brand has kind of their superstars, as I've said, colors that I absolutely love and always want to have in my palette. And now I can't even imagine just limiting myself to one brand, because I don't believe that there is one brand that gets it right all the time better than others. So feel free to have palettes that are mixed. And I will do here a shameless plug for my perfect palette, which I use in all my videos. You can find that one on my store. The reason I love it so much is because I feel it really easy to take that concept in theory and make it happen in reality, because it accommodates so very easily tube paints and pan paints. So that's just my little shameless plug for my palette. So those are my top tips when it comes to watercolor. I also talk about this in detail in my shopping guide. If you want that, you can head on over to my website and sign up for my newsletter. You'll get it in your inbox for free, and I never spam. I only send things when I have something important to say, which is not very often. So you won't have to worry about getting daily emails from me. But if you want more information kind of in a written format, I know a lot of people prefer to have something a bit more organized that they can read through. I recommend signing up and getting my shopping guide. Let's move on to brushes. When it comes to brushes, I have two main tips. The first one is not to buy these sets that have a large selection of brushes in every single size. So, those sets, sometimes you see them on Amazon and they're very inexpensive, and then they'll have a round brush in sizes 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, all those things. Usually you don't need all these sizes. For the most part, it's good, especially when you're starting out, to have kind of your main brush workhorse. This also depends on your preferences and the size you're working on, but you'll find that kind of many artists will choose somewhere around the number 10 brush. If they paint larger, it might go up to 14, 16, 18, 20, but usually it's around that number 10 mark. And then you'll probably need a smaller brush for details. That's usually around the numbers 2, maybe 4, maybe 0, somewhere around there. But it's quite wasteful, in my opinion, to buy these sets that have like every size, because the differences are very small, and chances are you won't be using all these brushes. So that's my number one tip. My second tip to saving money when it comes to watercolor brushes is to buy synthetic brushes, meaning hairs that are synthetic and do not come from animals. Some people will disagree with me on this point, and that is of course completely okay, but there is no arguing that synthetic hair is cheaper than natural hair. And nowadays I feel that there are such incredible alternatives by major manufacturers that it is very comparable. I have painted with both. I have super fancy and expensive squirrel hair brushes. Honestly, I use them less. I love my synthetic brushes, and I feel that they perform at the same level. Also, you may find that many of your most favorite artists also use the synthetic brushes. So I really think that if there was something so much better and uncomparable and that was impossible to achieve with synthetic hairs, I feel that most major artists would just be using squirrel hair or different animals. But you will also find many wonderful artists that use more affordable synthetic options, and I don't think their work suffers for it. So that is my suggestion to you. You're of course welcome to try anything you want, but I just hope, especially if you're starting out and you're studying under a teacher that only uses Kolinsky sable or something like super fancy, and you don't want to spend $60, $80, $100 on a brush, there are some great alternatives. I have several videos on brushes, and I really don't think there is a good enough reason to spend that kind of money on an expensive brush, especially if you don't have that in your budget. So I don't want you to feel like you're missing out. I don't think you are. Again, some might disagree with me, but that's my opinion. So those are my top 2 tips on buying brushes. And the last thing I want to talk about is paper. And paper is a tough one because with paint and brushes, they can last you for years and years. But paper, you kind of go through it. And my top tips for you will be to, first of all, start with samples. Places like Jackson's Art Supply, and I'm sure other places, I'm just very familiar with what they have on offer sample packs. Companies like Hahnemühle, which is a very well-known German paper manufacturer have now pads that you can buy. It's at my local shop, but again, I'm in Europe, so this is kind of very, very local to me. Germany is right next door to Austria. They have these paper pads with a selection of their papers. Search out for these, try them before you commit to an entire pad or sketchbook with a paper you're not familiar with. This might save you a lot of money, and you might be surprised by the papers that you actually enjoy, because again, as you paint, as you get familiarized with your style, with your preferences, you might find that maybe you enjoy painting on a completely different paper than most of the people you watch or learn from rave about and works well for them. For me, for example, it was something like arches. So many people that I've watched only recommend arches, only paint with arches. I agree, it's a beautiful paper. The design of the whole thing is definitely gorgeous. The paper pad just looks, you know, old world, gives you a feeling that you're an artist. But I don't need this more expensive paper to make paintings that I love, and I actually found other papers that are cheaper that work better for me. And so I'm not saying, you know, arches is not good. It's a wonderful paper. There are, in my opinion, very comparable papers from other brands that sometimes you'll find at a better price point. But my point is, don't limit yourself to something just because someone else recommends it. Keep your mind open, try. And I also want to say, especially when you're starting out, I completely understand artists that recommend, you know, only to paint on 100% cotton paper, which is considered the high standards of watercolor paper. I completely understand that. And first of all, it definitely works better for many traditional watercolor techniques. And so it will improve your performance, and your painting will look completely different when painted on 100% cotton paper that is wonderful compared to some cellulose thin student grade paper. They will look different, and there are certain things you cannot achieve with kind of cheaper paper, thinner paper, non-cotton paper. However, there are a lot of times when you really don't need to have that fancy paper, and especially if this is something that is keeping you from painting. When you're starting out, let's be real, you're gonna make a lot of art that is trash worthy. And if you're only using fancy paper, you will find yourself kind of, you know, feeling precious and not painting as much as you would like, as much as you should, just because of that reason. And so I do recommend exploring other options. There are fantastic non-cotton papers out there. My favorite is this kind of nameless paper that I find in my local art shop from Hannemühle. I'm pretty sure it's all cellulose. It doesn't even say that. Usually when it's cotton, it says it's cotton because that's obviously a selling point. But this is some cellulose paper. I've shown it in many, many of my videos. I love it for the techniques I use, for the way that I paint. It works perfectly. And every time I go to the shop, I buy like a pad or 2 or 3 because it's so affordable, and I just love it. It's very thick and white and beautiful, and my granulating watercolors look like a dream on it. And so I see no reason to spend more money on paper that might be considered by some of higher quality, but for the way that I paint is really not needed. You know, if you go also to museums, and if you're lucky to find all kinds of like exhibitions that maybe show a little bit more of a famous artist's body of work, including their sketches, you'll see they paint on trash bags. They paint on just paper. They paint on anything and everything. If they can do it, we can do it too. So keep that in mind. Try, explore, have fun. That brings me also to my second point about papers. Tip number 2, sketchbooks. Sketchbooks serve a higher purpose than just saving money on paper, in my opinion. It's just a wonderful habit to have. It's a wonderful way of kind of seeing how your artwork develops. Certain artists only paint in sketchbooks, and I love seeing their sketchbooks. But that point aside, which I think it has great value, but that aside, sometimes you can find really great sketchbooks by manufacturers such as Cadi, for example, that will give you just a lot of paper, and I feel like that kind of gives you a license to play more, experiment more, because you're not so precious. It's not this, beautiful block of wonderful watercolor paper that has, 10 sheets or 12 sheets or 20 sheets. You start to get precious. If you have a thick, lovely sketchbook, you feel like you can go in, swatch, play, color mix, all those things. You get just more paper for less money. And I just find that format also to be very inducive to creativity, more, I feel, than, a paper pad or a paper block, and then just having some random piles of paper. Because to me, there's something, the value of a sketchbook, of a full sketchbook, is greater than the sum of its parts. So you might have some pages that are complete duds, a mess, ugly art. We all do that. But at the end, when you see that little window of your body of work, even if you're just starting out, even if it's all just, you don't know what you're doing, I have many of those. There's still something about it. And, if you continue to paint daily, you can look back at those sketchbooks and really see how far you come. And sometimes be inspired by something you made years ago or last month or whatever, and kind of develop that further. My last tip and hack is going to be a more general one. As I said, haul videos are wonderful. They are fun to watch. Product reviews, I find them to be more useful because you can actually hear what, the person usually had some time to play and paint with the materials. And then my favorite of this sort is an artist's favorites, because unlike a haul or a review of a particular palette, you can actually see what they use on a daily basis and what they enjoy using, and sometimes over years. So to me, that's kind of the value of these videos. If you want to watch something, and I completely understand that, I'm not going to tell you just, switch off YouTube. We're here now on YouTube, and go paint. I think that would be the most wise choice. But of course, if you're lying in bed in the evening, it's not even a relevant choice. And so I'm not judging anyone, but if you want to sit and watch something on YouTube, then try searching for things that are more, tutorials, techniques. If you want more product related videos, then favorites of artists you enjoy watching. And, maybe skip those hauls. The more you do it, probably the more the YouTube algorithm will get to know you and not recommend those videos to you. Again, there's nothing wrong with it, but I just find that sometimes it can kind of push us into that second hobby that we love so much, which is buying art supplies. So I hope you understand that I'm not being judgmental at all. I'm talking from my own experience. I wish I watched this video when I was starting my watercolor journey. If I watch someone that I, connect with their general vibe and the way that they approach art, I most likely wouldn't have bought half the things that I bought, because I felt like, I want to try everything, I want to see everything. There's a lot out there, but you'd be surprised how so much of it is similar and, sometimes not so different. So I hope this was helpful to you. Before I say goodbye, a little stamp update. Thank you so much to everyone who's been emailing me and messaging me and contacting me asking when my stamps will be available again. I was planning to do a restock in the fall, and I wasn't just like saying that. It's not like I enjoy, you know, having things sold out in my shop, but I'm just me and I can't have a large stock just sitting there. My stamps are made and shipped from the US. I'm in Europe, so I use a fulfillment center. And if I have stock lying around there, I pay for that. And so I try to order limited supplies that I know or hope will sell out pretty fast so that I don't have to pay those extra stock fees. If I were shipping this from my own home, this situation might be different, but this is actually a way that I can make it cheaper and faster for most of my customers who are mostly based in the US. I ship worldwide, but and the shipping rates are very, very good. This way things can go much, much faster and much cheaper for most of you. So that's how I operate. That's why, you know, some of you I know write to me, it's always sold out. It's not always sold out. I do regular restocks, and then I tell the world about it in my newsletter on Instagram and on YouTube. But obviously, you know, not everyone is online all the time, and some of you sadly repeatedly miss out. Yeah, this is the reason why. And because I've gotten so many messages, I want to do a restock soon. So if you're interested in any of the stamp sets, you can go to my website and see what I'm talking about if you don't know. If you're interested, then please leave me a comment below stating which sets you're interested in. If you already responded to my newsletter or participated in the poll that I posted this week, you don't have to do that again. I'm just like gathering all those numbers together. You're not obligated to do anything. I just want to get somewhat accurate assessment so I can order enough so that people who are interested will not miss out. So that's the update on the stamps. Please consider the fact that I will be out of office for some weeks of the summer, and so if there are any issues, I've had now hundreds and hundreds of orders going through the fulfillment center that I work with, and I've had a handful of issues, like, you know, I think one stamp set was lost in transit out of hundreds. And so the process is usually very, very smooth, but there are always unexpected things. And so if you have issues, please be patient. As I said, I'm trying to please everyone, but during the summer it's a little bit more challenging for me. I'm not always next to my computer, and the way that I work, I can't do like really everything from my phone, and so it is what it is. But obviously my main priority is to give you the best experience and the best products. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon in another one. Take care. Bye bye.